Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner. I'm co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church. Our forums are free and open to the public and occur most Sundays at noon. We encourage you to attend. Our church is located at 4700 Grover Avenue, and for more information, you can go to our church website at www.austinuu.org, and you can go to a link and see some of our forums on YouTube as well. And now, Douglas Bauer, one of our forum committee members, is going to be introducing today's speaker, Joseph Specter.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Joseph Specter, the General Director of the Austin Opera, and he'll be talking to opera in Austin and across the nation. Joseph will provide a short historical perspective on opera and discuss progress that has been made in this wonderful performance art form in recent years. Joseph will also describe the current operations of the Austin Opera and its current artistic vision. He'll also review the ongoing challenges in presenting live opera during the 21st century and conclude with a look at future opportunities. In terms of Joseph's background, he's an experienced administrator who draws from a deeper understanding of the arts and corporate environments. Joseph became General Director of the Austin Opera in April 2012 during a time of financial turbulence in the local organization. And prior to that, Joe was the former Director of Institutional Relations at the Metropolitan Opera, where he worked on corporate sponsorships. Previously, and this is interesting, Joseph was a Senior Client Service Associate at the investment firm Lord Abbott, where he worked with institutional investors in the marketing and relationship management areas. He's a professional baritone in his early career, and Joe earned an artist diploma from Philadelphia's Academy of Vocal Arts and is a graduate of the double degree program between Tufts University and the New England Conservatory. During his time as a singer, Joseph performed numerous roles through his participation with regional opera houses and young artist programs around the U.S. So please help me to welcome Joseph Specter and his talk about opera in Austin and across the nation.
Thank you, Douglas. Good morning. I think my first question would be just helpful for me to know who I'm speaking with directly here today. And so if you attend opera here in Austin, if you just raise your hand, that's pretty good. Okay, there's only one person without their hand up. Okay, we have some work to do today. Hopefully I'll make some improvement. I appreciate the introduction. I'm very grateful to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin for having me out today. It's one of my favorite things to do, to speak with folks about this organization, Austin Opera, about the art form itself, and really to be able to have a conversation about where we are and where we're trying to get to in the broader context, not just on the stage, but off the stage as well. So thanks for having me out. Thank you, Douglas and Bonnie, for introducing me and getting me out here. And I was so happy to find the place and to see a packed parking lot. That's really something to be proud of. I had to drive around the lot probably 3 or 4 times before I could find a space, and I sort of parked on the grass under a tree. So that's really, really exciting. My background, which Douglas sort of articulated, sounds like a very carefully plotted course from a young singer through the financial services world to be able to meld those things together into the job that I have today. Anything could be further from the truth. I wanted to be a hair band rock singer when I was a teenager and before that, and no one will teach you how to be a rock singer when you're 12 years old and your voice is breaking because you're going through puberty. And the pathway that I chose to pursue my rock career, which if you hadn't guessed by now did not flourish, was through the classical music path, which at that time was sort of a well-tread route, because even though we think about rock singers in a certain way with, leather pants or what have you, a lot of those folks, especially during the time that I was coming up, were trained classical singers that moved into the rock field or used a classical training approach to be able to sing. So I hope, to whatever extent that informs your idea of where I'm coming from. I think of opera in very populist terms. I think that one of the challenges we have today, as we'll sort of get into this, is how do we create models for more engagement, and we'll talk a little bit about the brand of opera itself. So let's jump in here. I think I sort of just plotted the path for this conversation. The roots of opera in Austin, which are deeper than I would have thought before I came here. Talking a little bit about our company, Austin Opera, which used to be Austin Lyric Opera, and you might have questions about that. The current artistic vision of the company, how we engage off the main stage, and then getting into a little bit more of a broader conversation, really hoping to hear what you have to say about the challenges and the opportunities that the art form faces today. Roots of Opera in Austin, and I have to give credit to Cindy Stone, who has been a longtime supporter and wonderful member of our opera family, for the information on the next few slides, which she researched during the time that she was president of our Opera Guild. And I just think it gives such a great context to something that's surprising for most folks. City of Austin was founded in 1939. The first opera house was built in Austin 22 years after that. 1839. Did I say 1939? That would be more recent. Yeah, that would be more surprising. Sorry, 1839. The first opera house was the Smith Opera House, built in 1861, and that lasted through 1878. And then the second opera house, so depending on how you count it, Austin's had about 4 opera houses. So the Millet Opera House, founded in 1878. So this is during the time that, Puccini, Verdi, Beethoven, these guys are, depending on which gentleman you're talking about, are either alive in the prime or even the declining years of their career, or right at the beginning. Austin already had an active opera world here. It was a lot different than the world we have today. The average production cost was $1,500. I don't know how many performances that was and who they were getting on their stage, but I can tell you that an average production today, when we do 3 performances of something like, say, Don Giovanni, costs us about $600,000. So that's a different world. Top reserve seats cost $1.50. We, in our world now, it's about $200, and the theater held 1,500 patrons. So that's one of the things that hasn't changed too much. We see 2,300 for each show at the Long Center. And there's the Millet Opera House. Probably looks familiar to you if you drive downtown a lot. It's still there today. There was the Hancock Opera House from 1896 through the 1920s, and it was marked by gaslight carriages, white opera cloaks. It was a place to see and be seen. This was a town that's more cosmopolitan than a lot of people give credit for. Just a sidebar: when we did outreach performances of The Elixir of Love last spring, we brought a director in who hadn't been acquainted with Austin before, and he wanted to do a very Austin-centric, 30-minute reduction of Elixir. And his idea before he got here was that everyone would be in cowboy hats and cowboy boots. It's amazing. It's amazing. We corrected that impression. We ended up with something a little bit more authentic. But here is the Hancock Opera House, which only lasted till about 1960. It was torn down. It was on 6th Street. But during the time it was there, they hosted performances from a number of opera companies, including the Metropolitan Opera Company, which used to get national exposure not through performances in movie theaters, through HD technology, but by literally getting on the train and going around the United States and doing performances. And in those performances, you could hear the top artists of the field, Caruso, 20 trunks of clothes that he brought because all the singers had their own costumes. So the Hancock closed in the 1960s, and then there was a little bit of a gap between then and the time that Austin Opera was founded, Austin Lyric Opera, in 1986. It's fair to say that there was continuous performance of classical music through the university, but in terms of a professional performance, it took 147 years from the time of the founding of the city of Austin to get a professional permanent opera company here in town. And so aren't I'm glad that it's still here. I'm glad that it's still here. Austin Opera's history. Since many of you have been to our performances before, and I'm guessing that some of you have been subscribers or ticket holders for a long period of time, anybody from the very beginning? So these faces may be familiar to you. Walter DeClue, Joe McLean, Alfred King. These were the folks that had a vision that opera could be an art form that flourished in a more permanent way here. And we have to be very grateful for that vision, or I'm incredibly grateful for that vision, because opera is a unique art form. It has really specific and enormous demands financially, artistically, and even though there has been a flourishing symphony here for over 100 years, it still takes a vision to believe that this specific art form can have a home here, and these guys believed it. Oops, going the wrong way here. The first production was Magic Flute, beautiful production, sold out, Maurice Sendak. And then the first proper season after that inaugural production consisted of Romeo and Juliet and A Masked Ball, which are two productions that were included in our just finished 28th season. And it's wonderful to have been able to have that sort of homage to the roots of the company through bringing those operas back. I can't say those productions, they were different productions. Which brings us to sort of fast-forwarding today, the artistic vision for Austin Opera, and maybe this is something that might be of greater interest to everyone. And I think programming for an opera company is sort of one of the most interesting, important, keen challenges. There's an adage that is repertoire is destiny, and to that extent we have a profound responsibility in terms of what we're going to put on the stage to make sure that we're presenting an opera company that has artistic vibrancy and relevance to our community. This is the guy that has a lot of that job, Richard Buckley. You usually just get to see the back of his head. He's a wonderful conductor whose roots began in the symphony orchestra space. His father was a conductor, a very famous conductor named Emerson Buckley, who, among other things, was the preferred conductor for Luciano Pavarotti, and was a magnificent artist that understood conducting for singers, and I think that is a quality that he has passed on to his son. Richard is able to deliver wonderful performances, I believe, for our community, in part because he understands the room that the voice needs in order to be able to be successful. He's a wonderful advocate for singers in that particular sort of way. And about a year and a half ago, our company, our board, had a visit from Mark Skorka, who's the president and CEO of Opera America, which is the national service organization for opera companies in the United States. And Mark took us through sort of a strategic planning exercise, and one of the outcomes of that was a revisiting of our artistic priorities that Richard engaged in which we came up with this sort of poorly drawn diagram that I came up with on PowerPoint. So you have to forgive, this is not the artistry we're talking about, okay? However, it's really, really good talking points. And see, it's sorry, a little bit grainy to see on the screen, but we call this our artistic vision diamond, and maybe someday I'll get a better drawing program so that the diamond can be equally sided and equally angled. But I'll tell you what the key points are and just dig in just a very tiny bit about what that means for us in terms of programming. The points going around are our University Alliance, named artists, alternative venues, world premieres, American works, a concert series, debut artists, and new productions. This sounds like categories for Jeopardy, but they're not. What these are sort of focal points for us to think about as we're programming a season. And each of them has importance in different ways. First of all, this town is defined by a few really key things, and one of those elements is obviously the presence of the university. And our alliance with the university and universities, because that can extend to other universities. Ian Davidson, I saw, was playing here today. He's oboist in our orchestra, and we've recently formed a great connection with TSU through Ian. But we have had a very deep connection also through the University of Texas, and that has been a great source of energy and talent for our organization. The manifestations of that go from things that are very obvious, from singers that perform in our chorus or in our orchestra, to things that are very recent, very exciting. For instance, our production of Verdi's Masked Ball, which opened our just past season, was a coordinated effort with the university's School of Theater and Dance. And through that collaboration, we were able to put something on the stage through projection technology that under our own steam we wouldn't have had the resources to accomplish. Named artists and debut artists, I think that I'm going to put these two together. Richard and I are very committed to bringing the best artists we possibly can to Austin. And sometimes those are people that are very, very well-established artists who are coming here to give back to the art form, people that are singing at the Metropolitan Opera, singing at La Scala, Covent Garden, one of the big houses, and want to make sure that regional opera continues to thrive, and they recognize their ability to contribute to that. A good example is our production of Romeo and Juliet this year. We had Stephen Costello, who's a headliner tenor at the Metropolitan Opera, Joyce Elkoury, also from the Met, and we were very fortunate to live in a time when artists aren't pigeonholed into a spot. It used to be if you sang at the Met, you sang at Chicago Lyric Opera, one of these big houses, you couldn't then go and slum it down at a regional opera company. It would tarnish your otherwise pristine reputation. And fortunately now, everyone recognizes in the field that we all have to help each other out, and that's a great benefit to us. Another thing that we are also committed to is making sure that the great artists who haven't yet had their day in the sun, but that we believe are going to, are presented on our stage. And that's a way for us to get a value for you as audience members, and to elevate the art form by being able to curate that group of young singers that are so promising and exciting. Ricardo from Masked Ball, Dominic Chenis, is a young tenor, great example. He made his professional debut with us in just this past fall, and now he has engagements throughout Europe and the United States. The career is actually just exploding very quickly. So that's really fun. We have performances in alternate venues. This is an area where the industry, I think, is exploring a lot. People think about opera. If they don't know anything else about the art form, they think of the old opera house, they think of the big costumes, they think of the big sets, they think of a big stage, and they think of a big ticket price and things they can't easily overcome. So how can we get out into the community, share the art form in a way that's exciting, that's fun, that may build some curiosity for folks to come in and see us on our main stage, and hopefully also at the same time let them know that we're not so scary, and in fact ticket prices don't have to be so scary either. Break down some of those real barriers of entry that are often perceived and very often not real. World premieres and new productions, I'll group those together. I think these are both obvious chances for us to put an artistic stamp of our own, to give our voice to a piece that either was already composed or one that may be actively composed. Verdi's Masked Ball, with the projection set that we talked about before, that was our first new production in several years, meaning that we commissioned and designed, of course in a team context, all of the things that you saw on that stage. They weren't rented from other opera companies and cobbled together. Very often when we present productions, we're using a set from one of our colleagues in the field and costumes either from the same colleague or another colleague, and bringing those together, hiring our own singers along with our local musicians, singers, and stagehands, and that's often the product that you see on our stage. When we can present a new production, newly created production, or a new opera, that's an opportunity for us, even if I'm going to get mail sometimes that says that they didn't like it so much. It's art. So it's a chance for us to expand horizons that way. So those are sort of in any given season, these 8 touch points we're going to touch in various degrees, in various depth. And because we only do 3 operas, it's very possible that a given season won't include all 8 of these elements. But as a sort of a compass, it's a really useful thing for us to have focus on. And also helps us talk about the company. I'm going to skip forward here. This is probably the least surprising slide that I could present. And what this is a list of the top 10 operas by sales in terms of single tickets. So we basically right now sell opera in two different ways. One is for season ticket holders that come, or at least buy tickets for all three shows, hopefully come to all three shows, and often get a discounted rate, but by making an early commitment and joining us for the whole season. And then the other way is through single ticket holders, which is someone that buys a ticket for individual performances. And that second group of people, those are the ones represented in this chart. And I'm going to read the names to you since it's a little bit faint on the screen. Here are the operas, the top 10, this is in order, of single ticket sales. Carmen, La Bohème, Turandot, Aida, La Traviata, Marriage of Figaro, Die Fledermaus, Madame Butterfly, Barber of Seville, and Magic Flute. And you can probably see this purple stripe here. That's the Fledermaus, and the reason it appears in that purple is because I think about opera as sort of in three main categories. This is an organizational tool for me more than anything else. And the three categories I would put operas into, and some of them fall a little bit into different buckets, and sometimes the buckets change over time, but the light blue titles are the ones that I would call the beloved operas. These are the operas where if I put them in a season, I know I'm going to do pretty well on ticket sales. That group of operas does change, and there are operas that 10 years ago were pretty reliable ticket sellers, like Trovatore, Verdi's Il Trovatore, or Rigoletto, which are no longer sort of guaranteed titles. That's right, which is a terrifying reality for me. Die Fledermaus is in another category, which I would call the beloved, less-known titles. They're solid. They can be wonderful operas. They can be terrible operas, to be completely honest. But they're generally lesser-known titles today. I'm speaking really in terms of the perspective today. They're lesser-known titles today of known composers. So Die Fledermaus by Strauss, traditional less-known is what I call that. Now, I run an opera company where single tickets represent only a very modest portion of our annual budget. I would say single tickets represent about a tenth of the revenue we bring in a given year. Season tickets are a much more meaningful portion, about double that amount. And then the rest of the budget is filled out by contributions. But when you look at just the ticket revenue, season tickets and single tickets, and you combine those two lists, you combine those two pieces of revenue, the top 10 operas in, this is over a 20-year history roughly, of our box office looks a lot different. And so blue, the light blue, is beloved opera, purple is traditional, less known, and then green is, this is a term that's got some unfortunate sort of air around it, but I'm going to call it contemporary, just for lack of a better word, okay? So this is the top 10 now, when you take into consideration all ticket revenue, including season tickets. So you got 5 of the blue, those are the beloveds. You got 2 of the traditional less knowns, and then you got 3 contemporary operas: Candide, Dead Man Walking, Cold Sassy Tree. And what this tells me, and what is evident when you look at the box office data holistically, is that our best seasons, the most important seasons we present, are ones not of artistic consistency, but of artistic vibrancy. And this mix is really sort of telling in a certain sort of way. Here, contemporary operas out-represent the traditional, less-known operas, which are Die Fledermaus and Die Valkyrie, if you can believe it. Carmen, Aida, La Bohème, Giovanni, and Tosca still managed to make the top 10, but some of the others are eked out. And I think that's a wonderful statement about Austin. Its interest in works of art that are both the mainstays of the art form, but also its adventurousness. And I think that even though I joke around about the mail that I get about contemporary work, and there's no question that the big opera titles, Carmen, Aida, are going to be always well represented by our organization. But in a subscriber survey that we did in 2013, 30% of our base said they were interested in contemporary opera, and that's a pretty meaningful proportion. And it's very exciting because it expands our ability to reach beyond just a few operas a year, and to make sure that we're not recycling Tosca every 3 years. You're giving us the opportunity to share other titles with you as well. And that plays right into our 2015-16 season. I kept the same color coding. This is terrible. I'm a very visual person. We're opening for the first time in September, on September 26th, Long Center Stage, with a concert presentation of the music of Wagner and Strauss. That's Richard Strauss, not Johann Strauss. Very important distinction. And that's a one-night-only event. So those of you who are coming to the opera, please consider adding that to your season. We didn't put that into the subscription series so that you'd have a choice, but I hope you choose to come, because it's material that we are very excited to present, that we don't get to present often because of the theatrical demands and because of the longer lengths of the performances. Then moving into our subscription series, Aida, obviously one of those big top 10 titles, and then Of Mice and Men, Carlyle Floyd, one of the real masterpieces of the American opera repertoire, and then The Barber of Seville. So I think that this season is very exciting because it goes exactly to that kind of vibrancy that I think resonates most with Austin. And I know I'll get a couple pieces of mail about Of Mice and Men, but hopefully from nobody in this room. And if you're one of them, let's get it out today. I want to hear about it. Our season opening Gala concert, by the way, is going to feature this wonderful, dramatic soprano, Heidi Melton, who's really making waves on her way up. She's young. This is one of those performers that I think you have to keep your eye on, and I really hope you get to hear her. The excitement around her talent is enormous, and we're very, very happy to have her here. The concert, just so you know, is going to consist of things that are probably the most recognizable work, operatic work of Wagner and Strauss: Rienzi Overture, Tristan and Isolde. From Strauss, you'll have the Rosenkavalier, Salome, and it's just going to be a great night. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip through some of these details and show you a couple pictures. The season's going to be great. We've got this incredible, enormous Sphinx head that's going to be on the stage at the Long Center. This is our Aida set, and was originally built in Rio de Janeiro, and has made its way around the United States, and now is going to be on our stage. I think it's absolutely the kind of production that gets a lot of excitement in Austin. Big, thrilling, heavy set, and I think you'll all have fun seeing it. There it is in a different lighting scenario. There will be dancing. I won't ask you to dance. Of Mice and Men is a stunning set from Utah Opera that just premiered a couple of years back, and has the blessing of Carlyle Floyd, the composer, who will also be here for the opening of the performances in January of next year. So I hope you can come. Obviously, this is a more sparse production that tells the story of poverty and this agricultural space, and it's going to be incredibly sad, but it's opera, so I hope you enjoy it. And then this is just the set on its own for Barber of Seville. Again, in our most traditional works that we're presenting next year, they are in the most traditional sort of format. So if you're one of the people that's written me a letter asking me, please make sure when we do traditional work, it's with traditional sets, you definitely get your fill next year. And there's another piece of Barber. What people often don't know about, even folks that have been subscribers for a very long time, we have a pretty robust engagement with the community through in-school programs, lecture programs around town. This is an area of the company that I'm really interested in, and over a period of time we really are excited to see develop. I think that it's pretty inarguable that exposure to the arts at a young age is one of those sort of key factors for the survival of our art form, and all the cultural arts, and so we're really dedicated as part of our mission to making sure that we're really active in that space. And so the way that we reach the audiences in the largest numbers and maybe the most effectively is through our Access Opera program, which is free dress rehearsal access for kids primarily in grades 5 through 12. We reach thousands of kids every year through that program. They come with a complete lack of filtration when it comes to their reactions to what's on stage, and it's both thrilling and terrifying to find out what we've done, what's going to work, because typically their reactions in the theater are a good barometer for if we've done our job with the stage direction. We have a K through 4 in-school program called Opera Treasure Chest, which is a hands-on, very participatory program that teachers can use to use opera-related materials, coloring books, lesson plan exercises that sort of engage across a number of different topics, but using art form as a medium for the kids to participate. And that reaches, I think we're about 15 schools this year. We do lectures in the hall before every performance. So if you come to a show and you haven't seen one of these, I encourage you to come. We have doctoral students from the University of Texas that have been presenting these the last couple of years. So it's a chance for us to promote their engagement with the art form as well, and they always give really good historical context. And Opera Previews, which is a paid program, you don't have to have a ticket, you don't have to like opera, you could just like Chez Z, which is where we do most of these. Pay $20, sit and have some nosh, and listen to some folks talk about the upcoming production. We started just this past year a master class series at the University of Texas, also free and open to the public. Please come to those; they're so cool. To hear the artists that have sort of made it, give their perspective to the folks that are still on their way up. And usually, a lot of our artists that are presenting are younger. It wasn't that long before, maybe 10 years earlier, they were in the exact same spot, and the wisdom and the passing on of that wisdom is really fantastic. Maybe it's just my former singer self sort of geeking out, but I encourage you to come to those. I think they're sort of illuminating, knowing what's going on in the minds of these folks when they're on stage and stabbing each other and singing high notes, usually at the same time. And that brings us to challenges and opportunities. Peter Gelb, who runs the Metropolitan Opera, said on so many occasions that opera is a terrible business model. I would say it's terrible. It is terrible, but it's also terrifying. And this is the terrifying pie chart, even though it's in sweet colors. I think there's nice color choices for this pie chart. The light blue. These are sources of revenue for funding what we do. The light blue is contributed revenue, and this surprises some people. Others probably not so much. About 2/3 of our budget is funded through contribution. The yellow portion is tickets, which is a much smaller portion, about 1/3 of the budget, and then there's a small balance of income that we receive through endowment distributions. And what this means to me is it's a couple of things. One is this disproves the commonly held idea that opera is elite. And I mean it in this specific way. Generous contributions make it possible for anybody in Austin to be able to come and see opera. It's folks who may have had a certain amount of success in their lives that are making those contributions. Very often it's folks that are making contributions at $10 or $20. But the net result of that is that ticket prices begin at $15 for what we do. $15. A season subscription you can get for $50. And I think that that's something that we can be tremendously proud of. When going to ACL for a weekend can cost you $1,200 to sit in a muddy puddle in a folding chair 200 yards from a stage. Who's the elite? Who's the elite art form? I don't make you sit in mud. I mean, you can, I suppose. You can bring your own mud into the theater, but then I have to pay a cleaning charge. So please don't do that. What this means to me is that we are in the inspiration business. And if we're not inspiring you, if we're not making you happy, if we're not bringing this art form to you in a way that is engaging and exciting and thrilling and fun, then we're really missing the mark. And we're definitely not going to be successful, because that inspiration is what enables, encourages, inspires people to give money to the organization through contribution. And people sometimes say to me, Joe, I could never go and ask somebody for money. I hear that a lot. People, sometimes singers that are thinking about coming into the field of administration, where fundraising, no matter what you're doing, whether you're, if you're an administrative assistant, if you're the general director, if you're, if you work in the technical area, no matter what you do, you're somehow engaged with development. If you're bringing this art form to the stage, you're an advocate for the organization. And I say that's actually the easiest part, because I love opera. I love opera. And if I was asking you to give me the money directly, I'd probably have some ethical issues that I need to address. But on top of that, I'm not doing that. I'm asking for us to share together in making this really strange and wonderful thing happen. Those are the two adjectives that I put together more often than any others when I think about opera. For me, strange and wonderful covers it. There's nothing stranger than 100 people on a stage singing at the top of their lungs in a foreign language while 50 people are in a hole in the ground dressed in tuxedos. I mean, that's a very strange paradigm. And isn't it wonderful that we get to put all of that together and create this strange and wonderful thing together and share it? Here is a really troubling statistic, a little hard to see. This is from a survey of the National Endowment for the Arts. And the survey was called A Decade of Arts Engagement, Findings from the Survey of Public Participation in the Arts 2002 to 2012. And the area that is circled here in red has the statistics for how many people say that they saw an opera performance in a year. In 2002, it was 3.2%. In 2012, it was 2.1%. So as a percentage basis, and we know opera is not reaching everybody. It would be so wonderful. We know it's not reaching everybody, but the fact that we've lost roughly a third of that audience in just a 10-year period is really staggering. We have to take that so seriously. If it's encouraging to you, that number moved from 2.1% to 2.2% in 2013. So that's a 5% increase. That's a 5% increase. So maybe there's a glimmer of hope there. And I think that the thing that we have to take from this is that we have to be very, very honest with ourselves about the challenges of building audience in an environment where traditional audiences appear to be leaving. And it's worth mentioning here on this 2.1%, which honestly, if we had 2.1% market penetration in Austin, I could take every third day off. I mean, it would be wonderful. This 2.1%, a lot of these folks who said that they saw an opera in the last year were folks that saw Les Mis or Phantom of the Opera, particularly those two titles. And I think there's a really interesting conversation right there about why they're wrong, or if they're wrong at all, about whether or not they actually saw an opera. I'm probably going to punt that into the Q&A. So what opera companies are trying to do is get out, reach new audiences, excite people in larger, scalable ways. I think the one of the most obvious efforts that's going on is the Met Live in HD program. Almost everyone here has come to our opera performances. Have you put your hand up if you've gone over to one of the HD movie theater performances? Okay, that's a smaller number. That's interesting. But they are different experiences. Going to see opera in a movie theater is very different from going to see it in the opera house. And I think that experiential difference, I wouldn't say that they're two completely different art forms, but I think to the extent that audience experience what it's like to go into the theater, into the long center, to put your clothes on, wear that gown that in Austin maybe you only get to break out once every couple of years, to get to have that glass of champagne. The experience that you have from the moment you begin engaging with us, you heard about a show, you come to the website to find out when you can go get tickets, we have to think as an art form more holistically about how people engage. It's really not just the moment of performance, it's the whole thing. And the Met Live in HD is a way that you can do that in your pajamas with popcorn instead of in a gown with a glass of champagne, but both are valid. Both are valid. A number of opera companies have found great levels of engagement through programs such as simulcasting their performances to a local ballpark. San Francisco does this, a giant stadium. That's the picture you're looking at there. They got some opera singer looks like maybe Traviata on a jumbotron. I think that's pretty cool. Dallas does something similar at Cowboy Stadium, and what's interesting about these programs is that in a recent zip code study that Dallas Opera did around their program, the people that showed up for the stadium performances were from, in most cases, different zip code than their subscriber base. So this is a way to deliver the art form meaningfully to a group of people that might not otherwise come. And really, that's what we're here for. So you can't discredit that, even though it's not a traditional performance. Opera companies are also putting on more contemporary subject matter. This is Nico Muley's Dark Sisters in Philadelphia, which was opera about a true story about a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints polygamist family and their struggles in a very humanizing sort of story. Whatever you think about that, it was certainly contemporary subject matter. Sometimes we're using alternate venues for live performance, not just the jumbotrons, but this is Long Beach Opera's performance of Ricky Ian Gordon's Orpheus and Eurydice that was performed in an abandoned swimming pool. And not just at LBO, but I believe in Chicago Opera Theater as well. So these are creative ways. Sometimes you could look at them as, a marketing and PR type play, but they point to an appetite that people have for experiencing opera in ways that are outside of that traditional grand opera house sort of style. In our case, we did a flash mob last season at Tosca. Flash mob's like a pop-up performance, unannounced performance, and we had a performance of the Te Deum from Tosca, which was going to open just a week later. The red circle here, this is the screenshot from my cell phone, and this red circle here, I got the day that we hit 6,990 views of this video. It's somewhere around 15,000 today. But what's so meaningful to me, and it was just fortuitous that I wasn't stalking YouTube views and waiting for this moment to happen, but what's so symbolically powerful for me about this was that 6,990 and 2,330 is the capacity of the Long Center. So for 3 performances of Don Giovanni or Turandot Tosca, if I've sold every single seat in the house, that's the same number of people that viewed this flash mob of Tosca online. And I think that points to how essential digital communication and digital sharing of this art form is going to be for our future. All the best opera stuff, in case you don't use YouTube at all, I'm guessing that most people watch some YouTube clips. Who's used YouTube at all? And who's watched YouTube of opera, any opera content at all? Still pretty good representation. And I think the future, when you look at the trends in terms of demographics and who's using social media, Facebook and YouTube are very, very dominant sources of online engagement for our audience base of any age. More than half of our audience over 65 years old are Facebook users. So these are opportunities for us to share the art form. And I actually brought the clip of the YouTube video of this, but I'm going to move past that because I want to get to the Q&A, and I think you can look it up on your own. So we're at this moment of opportunity, I guess is what I would say. It's well known that a number of opera companies have faltered in recent years, very nearly Austin Lyric Opera in 2011. In my world, that was a very, very scary moment. Anytime you see a regional company fold, it's terrifying for what it means for the field at large. And we've seen plenty of companies face that demise. And it's so exciting that in the 4 years from that time that this company has been able to thrive, to present what I hope you share with me has been really wonderful performances, really wonderful singers, to keep the artistic integrity alive and still be able to keep the books balanced, which is an unbelievably difficult thing because the landscape is moving. So going into Q&A, I want to say thank you to you for anybody that's ever bought a ticket or will buy a ticket. I'm interested in your perspective, and if I may, I'm going to throw a question out to the group to get our Q&A started. Okay. So my question to the group, and talking about that NEA question for a moment, the 2.1% folks that have seen opera last year, Phantom, Les Mis, and also what we would maybe in a more conventional sense deem opera. My question to you is, what is opera? Definitionally, what is an opera? Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. Does anyone want to respond to that question?
Let me and before I do this, I want to say, okay, if you can tell me what distinguishes an opera from any other art form, and you can nail that down for me, because nobody I've spoken with has been able to do this in a way that I haven't been able to say, well, that's true, but what about this? If you get that, I'll give you 2 premium tickets to any performance this year. I swear, I have the power. I'm wielding my power. 2 premium tickets if you can tell me the one distinguishing characteristic that separates opera from any other art form. I'm challenging you. I hope you come up with something.
And a challenge is to make it concise as well. Kent Stewart.
I know I'm not supposed to comment, but I retired here 20 years ago, and the first thing we did was join the opera company. And I want to congratulate you on last year.
Thank you.
And I want to say particularly memorable was Waiting for the Barbarians. The music on that was astounding. I want to know what the question is, where you changed from the lyric opera to the opera. What caused that?
Sure.
What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I thank you for supporting the company for so long, coming to our shows. Waiting for the Barbarians was a wonderful artistic achievement that preceded my time here. So I can't take too much credit for that one, except that it was a show that embraced Austin's fondness for Philip Glass, and their ability and willingness to try something new. I love that. And I'll say that we have plans to hatch some future interesting opportunities, not necessarily glass-oriented, but that will hopefully inspire you as well. I would say that something that became very clear to us as an organization over the past few years, and really especially looking at that time from 2011 and 12, was that we had an issue that not directly related to the art itself, but about how we build new audiences, how we're going to grow as a company in a strategic sense. And there was I know that the word gets abused a lot, so I just hope you'll indulge me. We had an issue with our brand. Austin Lyric Opera, when I first arrived, had become, for people that were well acquainted with the company, associated with a certain level of turmoil. So you had this one issue. The company went through a substantial rebirth. We went from being $2 million in debt with programming that, frankly, was causing people to doubt whether or not they would return to our stage. We had a lack of energy in our, in the opera family writ large, and really the turnaround of the organization was a really important moment, and the idea that there was not a new organization. We didn't change the name dramatically, but an organization that had taken a certain sort of step forward was important in terms of saying that we had reached a new chapter. So there's this one piece. Another critical piece is that we're having a lot of folks that are moving from the coasts, from New York, from California, or even folks that have been here in Austin but haven't necessarily heard of us before, for which the word lyric is a bit of a challenge. If you know what the word means, or what the word refers to contextually in opera, I would say that in any given season it's not unusual for us to not have any lyric operas per se at all, or to have one, but almost never to have a full season of lyric opera. So it definitionally didn't suit us. And then for people that were well acquainted with the art form, that were coming from other areas, I had many conversations with folks that said, "Oh, I thought this was like a GNS company, or that you do musical theater, or it's college kids that are performing." And indeed, there was an idea at the outset of the company that it was going to be much more about promoting younger artists. So there was maybe some validity to that at the very outset. People that don't know opera at all, they hear the word lyric, and it sort of puts them at arm's length because it says you don't know what that word means, so maybe you're not welcome. So whether you knew the company, whether you knew the word lyric, whether you didn't know the word lyric, it wasn't suiting us, and we were ready sort of to break the shackles of a brand that was not serving us and was not serving you as well as it could have. So that's a little bit of a long answer, but I will say that it's been an exciting change for us, and I appreciate the fact that people that were with us for a long time have continued to stand by us through that change, because it was important to us that people not feel that we were abandoning the things that were core and wonderful about the company.
We have a question from Douglas Bauer.
One of the operas in the last season, Mass Ball, had a partially projected set. Do you believe that's going to be more common going forward and become a standard part of operas?
Thank you for that question. I would say that opera and theater, in a broader sense, has always engaged meaningfully with technology, and in recent years, projection technology has become an important way for us to be able to create evocative images and scenery that we might not be able to do through conventional hammer and nails and wood. So will projection technology become more and more important? I don't know that it will ever be the dominant way in which we create atmosphere on the stage, but I would say certainly that it will remain an important one.
To answer or try to answer your question of what is opera to me, it's a combination of drama and music, particularly choral music or singing, vocal music. And I don't know, that's the way I've always looked at it. But I also want to say that I was, as a member of the Austin Arts Commission for many years, I was in on the beginning of the reestablishment of the opera in the 80s, and also I want to point out that part of the contributions comes from the city of Austin through the allocations from the bed tax, and the opera does get part of that.
Yep.
And the other thing is, as far as letting people know about opera, I represented the Arts Commission on the Austin Convention and Visitors Bureau for about 6 years. And let me tell you, they don't think in terms of the opera. And I would have to bring them almost every meeting to the fact that opera and other classical music forms are part of the music capital of the world.
Thank you.
And they would all say yes, yes, but it never. I don't think it ever really penetrated.
Yeah. Well, first let me say thank you for your service on the Austin Arts Commission and for representing the cultural arts. The generosity of the city of Austin is tremendously important to us. In my position at the Metropolitan Opera, I did work on corporate sponsorship, but I also worked on foundation and government grants. And at the Met, I think government contributions were somewhere in the line of about, maybe 0.75% of annual fundraising, and that's not exaggerating at all. Here, it's much more meaningful, and the city of Austin's grant itself gets closer to about 10% of our fundraising, and it's very, very meaningful for us, and we're always appreciative and grateful for Austin's growth, which has enabled that generosity to grow over the number of years. So thank you for advocating for us. Yes.
We have a question from Joanne. Would you stand? About 5 more minutes.
I know that University of Texas at Texas Performing Arts Center has a program for contributions specifically for student tickets. Has the Austin Opera thought about doing anything like that? So I give a contribution of $20 for 2 students to get a $10 ticket.
We don't have a program specifically like that. We do have essentially a subsidized ticket price for university students of $15. I will say that for us, the number of students that take advantage of that is relatively low, usually on the order of a couple hundred per opera. So for us, it's really not about revenue generation. I do think it's important for there to be some small price tag, because if people don't have skin in the game, if they're just comp tickets, very often they just won't come to the show. And that's not true just for opera, but of really anything. People don't value things they don't spend a little bit of money on. So it's not meant to be punitive, but to sort of encourage participation. That said, if you ever want to buy a group of tickets for some college kids that you know, just give me a ring and I'll make it happen. Yeah, this ends up being about the same 15, but opera's expensive.
We have time for one quick last question from Sally Scott.
No, I want to do the answer. Okay. And I say that opera is different from all the others because it includes all the others. It has the symphony, the orchestra, the choral, the singing, the costumes, the scenery, and the music, and the story. And that's why it's the best.
Well, I obviously agree it's the best, or I wouldn't have this job. But in that paradigm, that exact definition you gave, then Phantom of the Opera is definitely an opera, right? Yeah. What about Oklahoma? What about Rent? There's an orchestra in the pit, some of the same instruments, singing a story, everything combined. Really tough. I don't ask the question to be antagonistic. I'm genuinely looking for an answer. And I think what I get more often than not after I've exasperated any individual person, and I've exasperated so many, my poor wife, she's heard me talk about this stuff all the time, is, well, you know it when you see it. But it's just not true. Elegance. So Phantom of the Opera, definitely an opera, definitely elegant. And then Don Pasquale, which is not of an elegant subject matter, is definitely not an opera.
Well,
it's tricky.
We want to thank you for sharing your excitement for opera, communicating your vision, and I think we're all leaving here inspired and wanting to see more opera. So thank you so much for taking the time to come.